All right, we're going to keep it simple this morning. Not too many graphics, just football talk and a realistic pathway for the 49ers to upset the Seattle Seahawks in the divisional round of the playoffs. First, some news. Christian McCaffrey has been named a finalist for the Salute to Service Award. So congratulations to Christian, and a quick look at his version of the Willie Mays catch. Do you guys think that the football version or the baseball version is more difficult? I actually vote for Christian McCaffrey's. I explained it on the video yesterday. Willie Mays, that was the center field wall at the Polo Grounds, which was 483 feet away from home plate, which is a really, really far ways away. He didn't have to worry about crashing into that wall. He's at a full sprint there, already reaching the ball before even reaching the very, very lengthened warning track. Christian McCaffrey, meanwhile, you're not sure if the safety's going to be close enough to decapitate you. That's a really, really tough catch to make, especially considering the wind. Don't want to take anything away from Willie Mays' catch. They're two different sports, but two very similar photos, both taken on the East Coast. Anyway, this is how the 49ers beat the Seahawks. The 49ers have to apply the same principles that they did in Week 18, but actually execute them this time. And I think that if they have specific players back that they didn't have in Week 18, execution should come more easily. Now, they won't have George Kittle this time. They did have him in Week 18, but George Kittle might have been a little compromised in Week 18 because he was still dealing with the ankle sprain. They also didn't have George Kittle for the majority of the win against Seattle back in Week 1. And they still won. The Seahawks, there is one statistical weakness of this defense, and it's a really, really good defense. We could bust out the team tier chart to just give a standard overarching look at where these two teams are. But the Seattle Seahawks, the most efficient defense in the league, has actually been below average efficiency defending tight ends. Remember in Week 1, after George Kittle went down, Jake Tonjes had his coming out party and scored the game-winning touchdown. So if there's one position that I think can really take advantage of this Seattle defense, which obviously didn't back in Week 18, but did in Week 1, it's that tight end position. And I think that you have to look at Jake Tonjes in this game. I do think that it's going to be important for him to catch some rhythm balls from Brock Purdy. I believe that you do have to pass to set up the run if you are the 49ers in this game. Seattle did not play a single snap in base defense with a third linebacker in Week 18, and they were still able to stop the 49ers run game. So the 49ers are facing a defensive juggernaut. I mean, when we look at the top 10, top 15 defensive DVOAs of all time, the Seattle Seahawks find themselves on that list. You're facing a defensive juggernaut that is adaptable, that is built to take on offenses like you, that probably isn't going to give up all too many explosive plays. They haven't all season. They really didn't against the 49ers back in Week 18. They didn't give up any explosive plays, but they did in Week 1, and that is when the 49ers were able to create a little bit of separation downfield. So obviously the return of Ricky Pearsall is going to be important for San Francisco in this game. But I think first and foremost, you have to hit Seattle with bread and butter timing routes because they are so good against the run. You're going to have to replicate some of the run game's desired impact with the short passing game. Any team that is excellent against the run and can stop it in its sleep can generally focus its defensive line's attention on pinning ears back and rushing the passer, and that puts an offensive line at a big-time disadvantage, and that makes it really hard to attack downfield because the quarterback just won't have enough time to attack downfield. If they've got a good secondary as well, which the Seattle Seahawks do, well, then separation or lack of it becomes another part of the issue. And then you start playing a game in a 20-yard box. And that's exactly what the 49ers did against the Seahawks in week 18. They couldn't get it out of that 20-yard box. The Seahawks, because they knew that it was in that 20-yard box, were able to stop all yards after the catch. And what we saw in week 1, where the 49ers did get a little bit of rhythm passing in, they went on a 95-yard drive to start the game. So the short passing game was there, and then obviously they hit Ricky Pearsall on the skinny post on the third down early on. George Kittle scored the first touchdown before exiting with the injury, but the 49ers did find some rhythm with the passing game short. So even though they weren't able to run, they then were able to attack at opportune times downfield. Brock Purdy went 4 of 5 in week 1 on throws of 20 or more air yards against the Seahawks. Brock Purdy did not complete a single pass. I don't even think he attempted a single pass over 20 air yards in week 18 against Seattle. Now, they wanted to attempt one when they sent Sky Moore on the deep ball on the 4th down. That was going to be the play action strike for the 49ers, but the protection didn't hold up long enough. And the Seahawks are really, really smart. Like a lot of people want to compare the Seahawks and the Eagles, and I think it makes sense since those have been the 49ers opponents over the past 3 games. If you want to truly compare them as football teams, this is really interesting to me. Offensively, the efficiency is about equal for Seattle and for Philadelphia. The Seahawks have not been playing great offense ever since around week 10 or week 11. They started off really hot, but Sam Darnold and JSN, they haven't been as good down the stretch run. So that Seattle offense is in the same ballpark as Philadelphia's, but look how much better the Seattle defense is. It almost doubles up Philly's in terms of efficiency. So this is a bear of a challenge for San Francisco's offense. I could also split this into separate offense and defense charts so you could see where Seattle's defense is particularly strong. And I think they really, really lap the league in this regard when we look at the defensive side of the ball, when we talk about run defense. And I think that this is the big game changer with facing the Seattle Seahawks that the 49ers didn't necessarily face last week, but they still struggled to run the ball last week. But this is a whole new level. And, you know, even if the yards per carry end up being around the same, the fact that the Seattle Seahawks, this is XY, pass defense on the X, run defense on the Y. Look at the Seahawks. They're complete outliers in terms of run defense. So say that the 49ers run for 2.1 yards per carry Broncos or the Saints or a team like that. And then say they run at 2.1 yards per carry against the Seahawks. It's not the same thing because in all likelihood, the Seahawks were able to stop the 49ers and hold them to 2.1 yards per carry using much fewer resources than these other teams. That's how good the Seahawks are against the run. You can see them up here. And if the Seahawks have to use fewer resources against the run game to stop the run game, they can dedicate more to the pass game. It's simple math in that way. Week 18 was the perfect example of this. Week 18, the Seahawks were in nickel and dime the whole game, yet the 49ers could not run the football. And then the 49ers also, because they weren't able to convert the third downs, they went 2 of 9. They ran only 42 plays on the whole game, and they had only 12 rush attempts on the whole game. So if you want to beat this team, you have to hold the ball longer so you get more rushing opportunities so you actually can work on this run defense. I mean, if these guys only have to defend you 12 times against the run with how good they are, you're not going to have a good day. If you notice, the 49ers didn't start getting bigger runs, and they only had a couple of them. There was like a 9-yard run from McCaffrey and then a 10-plus yard run near the goal line on the winning drive. The 49ers didn't start getting bigger runs until late against Philadelphia. That wasn't until they had surpassed 60 offensive plays on the evening. Defenses don't really get tired until after the 50 or 60 play mark. You got to get them to at least 50 plays. I mean, 50 would be, that's bare minimum. That still would be too little to win this game. You've got to get up into the 60s, I think, if you're the 49ers. That's where you were in week 1, and you only got up to 42. You weren't able to stay on the field long enough to even remotely challenge a defense that is way, way up there. So for the 49ers, how are you going to do it? How are you going to come out? How are you going to convert third downs? How are you going to hold the football? It's not as simple as, oh, let's go out and run and do this. The Seattle will probably snuff out early runs from the 49ers. I really do think that pass to set up the run, similar to what the 49ers did against Philadelphia, is going to be necessary. The loss of George Kittle is a very, very difficult one for the 49ers because he spearheads both the run game and the pass game for San Francisco with his adaptability. We had the on-off splits for George Kittle over the course of this season. Weeks 1 to 7, when they didn't have him, the 49ers were like the number 23 or number 24 ranked rushing offense in the league as far as efficiency went. Week 7 onward, when they did have George Kittle, once he returned for that game against the Atlanta Falcons, the 49ers turbocharged it up to number 8 or number 9 in rushing efficiency this year. They have not been a juggernaut on the ground, but the run game has gotten clicking, but that was with George Kittle, and it also was against worse defenses. Now you're facing a Seattle Seahawks defense the week after Philadelphia generally shut down your run game, and you're probably going to have to walk an even narrower tightrope if you're Brock Purdy. I do think that Purdy's legs in this game will have to be a difference maker. I don't see the Seahawks giving up a lot on the ground. I'll keep on bringing this up. That they are a historically good run defense. So how deep into your bag of tricks do you have to go if you're the 49ers? They tried to run a trick play against Seattle back in week 18, and it went nowhere. Christian McCaffrey caught the ball for a minimal gain. Brock Purdy did run a couple times against Seattle, but again, the 49ers only had 42 plays. That's why, so many defenses will look good early in a game for a half, maybe for 3 quarters. But that's why we always talk about money time in the fourth quarter. And that's when the big name quarterbacks make their hay. And Brock Purdy has obviously been doing this. I mean, there are physical reasons for why quarterbacks have success, the really good ones late in games. And that's because defenses get a step slower. That's because the defenses can be on snap 66 or snap 72, or even in crazy situations in the 80s when it comes to snap count. The defense is a little bit more worn out. And if they're only at snap 42 at the end of the game, well, they're going to be playing at 120 miles an hour on the final snap of the game, and you're probably going to have no chance. You saw Brock Purdy almost get broken in half when the 49ers had the ball, and he suffered the stinger when they were down 13-3. I think that this is a classic deep water game. And now I'm going to flip this around and talk about the other side of the football. I wanted to address the offense first because the 49ers scored only those 3 points in week 18. And obviously things are going to have to be more productive for them to win this game on Saturday. But in the bigger, larger scheme of things, the 49ers are underdogs in this game by about a touchdown, 7.5, I think it is. They got beaten badly by the Seahawks in week 18. But in week 1, when they beat Seattle, they obviously had more at their disposal. They had Nick Bosa and the Fred Warner. Maybe they'll have Fred Warner this time. But when the 49ers had more at their disposal, they are the ones that statistically controlled this game. They brought the Seahawks to deep water. Sharks bring their prey to deep water. And the Seahawks drowned in deep water in the fourth quarter. What happened? Brock Purdy made the clutch play. Multiple clutch plays, one to Ricky Pearsall down the sideline, one to Jake Tonjes for the touchdown. Going back the other direction, Sam Darnold did not make the clutch play that he needed to. Nick Bosa came around the edge, strip sack, game was over. The Seahawks have been really, really good and balanced this year. The defense has been historically efficient. The special teams, along with the 49ers unit, has been at the top of the league, but the offense has not been a world beater for Seattle. And Sam Darnold has a reputation for a reason. He has had tough times in massive, massive games. Not all of them, But there have been really big games, and I could remember exactly a year ago in the wild card round against the Rams where things were brutal for Matthew Stafford. And that was a game against the Rams defense where he turned the ball over multiple times for the Vikings, not for the Seahawks, but he turned the ball over multiple times. That LA defense actually ranked worse than this 49ers defense through the first 3+ months of the year. And then the Rams turned it on, and they completely annihilated the Vikings and Matt Stafford and Sam Darnold. So when you look at this XY chart, you could see how elite Seattle is defensively. They're at the very top. But the data ultimately doesn't lie. It's been a middling offense. This is a team who has seen their defense and special teams lead the way. So if you're going to lead the Seahawks to deep water, that means that this game is very close, late, and then this game at some point falls onto Sam Darnold's shoulders late. And this is where probably the biggest difference since week 18 comes in. The 49ers are not the same team personnel-wise defensively. And that's a remarkable thing to say because they just played the Seahawks less than 2 weeks ago. But there's been a remarkable, rapid amount of change for the 49ers on the defensive side of the ball. Eric Kendricks and Garrett Wallow started against Philadelphia and played excellent football at linebacker for San Francisco. And Marquise Siegel entered the 49ers lineup at safety, and he was flying all over the field at safety. Siegel added a huge speed component to the 49ers back end that they were actually hoping to have entering this season. So Robert Saleh, then this is really cool. This is full circle 49ers Seahawks history. Robert Saleh came up as a quality control assistant under Gus Bradley, moving into the 2013 season, the Legion of Boom Super Bowl champion defense. That Legion of Boom defense was built on excellent edge rushing. Obviously, Michael Bennett playing a good defensive tackle position as well. Great cornerback play. Everybody remembers Richard Sherman. Bobby Wagner as the Mike linebacker, or the Seahawks version of Fred Warner. And awesome safety play. We're talking about eraser safety play. Superb athleticism. Earl Thomas was his name, playing the free safety position, the eraser safety position. And he ran a 4.3, and he had great instincts, so it might have been a 4.2 with the way that he played on the football field. Either way, athleticism and speed was extremely important in that Seattle Seahawks defensive success. So that's what Robert Saleh took with him into his career, and ultimately found his way back to San Francisco, installed the Seattle-style system, the cover 3 with the 49ers. It has evolved tremendously since he first took over in 2017. He's obviously been to the New York Jets and back. But I think that one thing that Robert has hung his hat on throughout the years, and this traces back to Earl Thomas with the Seahawks, so it's fitting that we're talking about this right now, is having plus speed and plus athleticism at safety. So entering this season, Saleh said, I want Marquise Siegel to be my starter. This is a rookie, 4.3, 4.4 speed, the best broad jump in the 2025 DB draft class. Let's plug Marquise Siegel in for that eraser-like athleticism on the back end. And let's plug in Jason Pinnock, who was a free agent. The 49ers added him. Saleh had him for a cup of coffee in New York. Another super toolsy player, like plus athleticism. Those were the two 49ers starters at the beginning of the season. However, they ran into trouble in terms of, especially with Marquise Siegel, in terms of coverage skill and just coverage know-how. Siegel was a rookie. His feet weren't wet at the NFL level yet. He got really torched in week 5 against the Rams. He was getting torched through the first few weeks of the season. See, he was fast. He had the ability, I think, to play the run. He was really tough as well, a good tackler too. But he struggled in pass defense. So the 49ers benched Marquise Siegel, and they went back to Jair Brown, who's the antithesis of the physical profile that Robert Saleh has often wanted at the safety position. They didn't draft Jair Brown when Saleh was the defensive coordinator. They drafted Jair in 2023 out of Penn State when Steve Wilkes was the defensive coordinator. And Jair is like at a 4.6 or a 4.7 40. He's a slower safety. Now, he's a very instinctive safety, but he's definitely slower. And I think that this 49ers scheme relies so much on the speed of the safeties, sideline to work, to cover some of the seams, to cut off some of the openings that need to be cut off. I think that there became some problems with that. And you saw a lot of the missed tackles on the back end, and you saw a lot of the struggles for the 49ers at the safety position. And it got to the point where Jair Brown strained his hamstring, and Marquise Siegel was forced back into the game, into the 49ers top lineup against the Eagles. And lo and behold, Marquise, and this is a big testament to him, he, over the 3 months while he was on the bench, you could tell that he was serious. You could tell that he was learning offenses. He was no longer out of position against the Philadelphia Eagles. He was no longer beaten in coverage against the Philadelphia Eagles. Instead, he turned into a tackling machine. And the 49ers' 3 leading tacklers were Garrett Wallow with 11, Eric Kendricks with 10, Marquise Siegel with 8. The 3 leading tacklers against Philly did not start the game against Seattle the week prior. That is a markedly different defense, and that's before we even get to the Fred Warner conversation. Now, so that you have 3 new players, and if you're talking about Warner, that's 4 new guys for the 49ers against the Seahawks. Now, I don't know if Warner's going to play or not. That's obviously a guessing game that we're going through right now. I predicted yes at the end of the video in case you guys were watching yesterday. But I think that he probably still has to clear some, you have to cross the T's and dot the I's. I think that's the situation with Fred Warner right now. We'll see how the 49ers are thinking. I do know that his goal has been to return for the divisional round. Well, the divisional round is on Saturday. We'll be headed down to practice here in just a little bit, and we'll see Fred Warner back on the field, and then we'll talk to Kyle Shanahan, and he'll give his official injury designation. I would guess that Shanahan will designate Warner as questionable. I don't know if there would be any benefit to straight up ruling him out right now. I think that if anything, you want to keep the Seahawks guessing. But if Warner is back, that opens up a whole new discussion about how the 49ers might use him. Would he be a full-time guy? Would he just be a third down guy? Would it be a specific blitzer for Robert Saleh? Would he want him in coverage? I don't know. I mean, this is one of the most intriguing return situations that we've ever seen. I drew some of the parallels last night, but we can draw them again right now. In 1997, Jerry Rice tore his ACL at Tampa Bay, just like Fred Warner, or at least where he hurt his ankle was at Tampa Bay week 1, and this was in week 15. This was Jerry Rice 3.5 months later. He scored a touchdown. Unfortunately, though, he cracked his kneecap in his return, so he was done for the season. And then there was Terrell Owens returning after 7 weeks with a rod in his leg. He had fractured his leg in late December. This was in the Super Bowl. 7 weeks later, Owens caught 9 passes for 111 yards. So both guys, former 49ers. Owens did this with the Eagles, but Jerry Rice, obviously former 49er. I would say these are the 2 greatest wide receivers of all time, Terrell Owens and obviously Jerry Rice at the very top of that list. They both are the standard bearers for insanely fast recoveries from very serious injuries. Fred Warner can enter that club because he was ruled out for the season. And then yesterday he said, the first 6 weeks, he wasn't allowed to put weight on the ankle. The fracture had to heal, all this and all that. Then after 6 weeks, Fred started talking about manipulating the return timeline. And that was through some of his hard work. One of the cool things that I talked to Fred about, he's been working with the San Jose State swim coach. I showed you guys this video of Fred swimming about a month ago. Like I just got out of the bay right now. I'm still a little bit cold. I still got the hoodie on right now. It's a little icy in the bay these days, especially if I'm not wearing a wetsuit. But I feel so good when I get out of that water. That something I talked about with Fred, and he said the same thing, that the water has these healing properties, right? And I think that not only did he get into the water, he got into Lake Tahoe in December. Over the 49ers bye week. That was icy. Not only did he do the whole cold immersion thing, but he's been in the water lap swimming, working on his ankle flexibility and strengthening. Like, Yeah, I used I don't do, sprints at lap swimming meets anymore. I do open water stuff now, so I'm not as big into some of the small ankle flexibility stuff that I used to be. But what I used to do is I would, ahead of a big competition, I would sit in front of the TV or whatever. I'm just chilling at home, and I would sit on my feet, but I would have my feet bent backwards. So like flippers, like they'd be bent backwards, and I'd put all the weight on them to like stretch out my ankle so it would be more like a fin, like a flipper. And when I saw Fred Warner kicking when he was swimming in his flutter kick, he put the video up. When I saw him kicking, I was like, damn, he's got strong, flexible ankles. And what I realized is that what he's doing in the water, the it can strengthen his what he's trying to rehab, right? Because you're undulating in that fin motion. And as soon as I saw that a month ago, I was like, okay, Fred is really, really serious about coming back because he's going through absolutely every possible thing on the checklist in order to make that ankle stronger. This is just in from Adam Schefter. Not really news. Fred Warner is pushing to play this week, and he's not giving up hope yet. The 49ers don't have to activate him until Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon. Yep. Yeah, that's what we've been reporting. So I like when Schefter basically takes everything that we've been putting out there on the local level and then aggregates it into a national thing. But Fred Warner is pushing to play. That was very, very obvious. And now I'm almost sure that Kyle Shanahan is going to rule him questionable today. And then the 49ers, because Fred is on IR, would have to formally activate him on Saturday afternoon. I'm guessing at around 1:00 would be the deadline. It would have to be before the inactive list came out. The inactive list is going to come out 90 minutes before the game. But as of right now, Fred Warner is not on that 49ers 53-man roster. Now, if he does play, again, this opens up a whole different can of worms. This is somebody the 49ers didn't have the last time they played the Seahawks. They did have him the last time they beat the Seahawks in week 1. I don't know if you guys remember, in week 1, there was a scare where Fred Warner took a cleat to the stomach and thought that he was going to like throw up. He was sitting there like dry heaving because he got kicked in the stomach. He also, I believe, on the same play, took something to the face and he was bleeding. So there was an instance where the cameras caught Fred Warner bleeding, and everybody thought that he was concussed or something. It wasn't a concussion. He actually was just bleeding from the face, and he wanted to throw up because he got a cleat to the stomach. Yet he still came back into the game, I think, like 2 plays later. And then he had the battle scar. I remember walking up to him in the locker room. He had the battle scar because of the whatever hit him in the face. It might have been a cleat to the face as well, but he definitely took one to the stomach that he told me, hey, I wanted to throw up after that play. That was, there have been so many instances of Iron Man Fred. He had only missed 1 career game in his entire career up until the injury for that happened in Tampa Bay. So to see him carted off and to know that he was going to be out for an extended period of time was extremely jarring because that had never happened before. But now he's resurrected, and now he's pushing to play on Saturday. And this is massive, massive stuff for the 49ers. He was out there on that practice field yesterday breaking down the 49ers team huddle. I don't think a smile has come off of Fred Warner's face in the last 2 weeks. Every single time I've seen the guy, he has just been beaming. It's been really, really, really cool to see. And, we should play some of the clips from him at practice yesterday. Get this up on the screen. This right here is Fred at practice. Extremely, extremely excited to be out there. He was dancing. He was very light on his feet. There are absolutely no visible ill effects of the ankle injury. Here you're going to see Fred bust out into a full sprint. and fire everybody up before the team huddle. And then, of course, the donning of the helmet. Big moment. He greeted all of his fellow linebackers who obviously were very excited. I mean, if you get Fred back and he lines up next to Eric Kendricks, you've got two all-pro caliber players, like, mentally, between Fred Warner and Eric Kendricks. I mean, talk about two savants who know the game at an extremely, extremely high level. Luke Gifford did not practice yesterday. Jair Brown did not practice yesterday, so I wouldn't expect either of those two guys to play. So that opens the door for Marquise Siegel in Jair Brown's spot. And Luke Gifford was the 49ers Sam linebacker for most of this season. But I think that at this point, if you get Fred back, D. Winters was back at practice too. So you get Fred back. You obviously have Kendricks. You have Wallow. You have Winters. I mean, this could go from complete talent deficiency to embarrassment of riches at linebacker very quickly. And, you know, then we can move on to the next, you know, real key here to beat the Seahawks. They ran for 180 yards in week 18. You don't take them to deep water if you don't stop the run in this game. You just don't. The Zach and Robert Saleh yesterday was adamant that there are only a couple bad plays for the 49ers run defense. He said that we stopped them for most of the game, but it was that Charbonnet run at the start of the game on 3rd and 2, and it was the Kenneth Walker 20-yard run on 3rd and 17 that really skewed things. And obviously those are plays that happened, and obviously those are plays that the 49ers are going to have to correct. But Robert Saleh's point was that the 49ers are a lot closer to shutting down this Seattle Seahawks run game than it might have seemed on the box score. We'll see if he's correct on Saturday. That obviously is very TBD, but I could tell you what went wrong on the Charbonnet run, and it was Tatum Bethune getting sucked into the wrong gap and Jair Brown trying to overcompensate. Neither of those two guys are going to play in this game. Bethune is on IR. His season is over, and you saw Jair Brown with the hamstring injury against Philadelphia, so Marquise Siegel is going to take his place. More disciplined team defense, everybody's staying in their respective gaps, fixes the Zach Charbonnet touchdown run. Maybe the 49ers even stuff him ahead of the first down, and it might completely change that game. The 3rd and 17 was the one that was the most frustrating for the 49ers. It's where John Lynch was yelling up in the booth. The TV cameras caught him. The 3rd and 17 was one where the 49ers, I don't think, put in optimal effort. And maybe it was a product of them being exhausted in this game. Maybe it was a product of them being down. I mean, at that point, you had Kendricks and Wallow in the game, but Wallow especially just got swallowed up by his block. I think there's a lot of criticism for Diamara Lenore on that play. I don't think that he was going at full speed. And again, it probably went back down to exhaustion, and the Seahawks were controlling the game. But that's why it's so important to win that arm wrestling match against the run early, so that you are the team playing this downhill. In week 1, the 49ers in many ways were playing the game downhill throughout. So even though they trailed toward the end, they had that statistical advantage, and they had the ability to, A, move the ball when they needed to in that game-winning drive, and B, make the defensive plays when they needed to in the game-winning stop with Nick Bosa. In week 18, the Seahawks held control of the arm wrestling match the whole way, so the 49ers were constantly skating on thin ice. The 49ers were, they had to make some of the tough plays to win the game. Like Christian McCaffrey, yeah, he dropped the pass, and it was coming off the tip, and Drake Thomas intercepted it. But if he makes that pass or that catch, of course the 49ers are right back in the game. But the 49ers were walking this narrow tightrope where that had to hit or they were going to lose the game. If you're playing the game downhill, if you stop the run, you're not walking that narrow tightrope. You actually can blink a couple times offensively and still come out okay, just like the 49ers did in week 1 when Purdy threw a couple interceptions and they still came out okay. So I do circle everything back to run defense, because I think that controlling the game is reliant on stymieing the run. You can't let a team run 39 carries, 180 yards on you like the Seahawks did. So with Kendricks in there as a starter, with Wallow in there as a starter, with the way that they played, 2 thumbs up for the 49ers. Siegel instead of Brown, I think that gives you an advantage in the run game for sure. Will Siegel be tested more in the pass game than he was by Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia? Maybe. But Deommodore Lenoir in his career against JSN has actually done really well whenever they've been matched up one-on-one. He hadn't given up a whole lot. And I do wonder how they play Lenoir in this game. I don't think they're necessarily going to follow JSN around with Deommodore Lenoir. But last week was the first time that we had ever seen Deommodore Lenoir split his time between both sides of the field. 35 snaps at left cornerback, 34 snaps at right cornerback. He said that he did that because Jalen Hurts preferred throwing to one side over the other, so they wanted to move him to kind of get into Jalen's head. But I think that it worked so well for the 49ers pass defense last week, that kind of that sense of balance. I thought that Renardo Green played better because of it as well. His head was more dialed into the game. I mean, he was able to lock down A.J. Brown on some of the more important plays of the game. I think that the 49ers might mix it up in that way as well, especially if you're trying to talk about taking Sam Darnold to deep water and then using that as, you know, your leverage point, your platform for some Sam Darnold mistakes to kind of prey on where he might blink, where he might see some ghosts. I think that this is a game where you might move some guys around in the secondary, just like you did last week against Philadelphia. You know, Mike also pointed out that you could use Warner on third down or, you know, as a big nickel in this game. You could add mass flexibility to the defense. The 49ers also need to generate pressure. And that's just something that they just haven't done this year after they've lost Nick Bosa. They've been last in pressure rate and last in sack rate. Maybe Warner comes in as a designated blitzer on some downs. It's hard to pick up a guy who's 6'4", 230 pounds. I mean, they call him the Fredditor. It's a play on Predator for a reason. Most of these linebackers built a little bit more like Eric Kendricks. Or if they're a little bit wider and bigger, then maybe like Dre Greenlaw. They're not built as 6'4" predators like Fred Warner. So you think about the running backs that might have to pick him up in the blitz game. I mean, there's a reason why this guy's a future Hall of Famer, because he can cover like a DB. He can fit the run like a Mike linebacker. He can blitz like an edge rusher. And he has the brain of a quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. Fred Warner back in college played a position that BYU just had to make up for him. It was called the star position. And he was playing out on the perimeter. It was like a nickel back. He really was a glorified defensive back is what he was at BYU. And we've seen him cover CeeDee Lamb, trail him 20 yards downfield, just blanket him in that divisional round playoff game against the Dallas Cowboys back in January of 2023. We've seen him do like really, really nutty stuff on the football field. We saw the flying tackle against the Rams where he's going sideline to sideline. I mean, that's ultimate eraser type of stuff from Fred Warner. So he's got a lot of different skills. And even if you don't want to play him at 100% capacity, you can choose one or two of those skills and you could plug him into spots if you're Robert Saleh to take advantage of those skills. He's like a chess piece. He's like the queen on the chessboard, right? The piece that can do everything. That's all powerful. That's Fred Warner for a defense. I don't think that they toss him out there if he's at any way physically limited. I think if they limit him, it's because they just want to make sure that he gets his full football legs back before he's 100% thrust into things. But the fact that he continues to make a push to play on Saturday could be one of the most interesting wrinkle generators that we've ever seen in professional football, because he's that good of a player and the 49ers are in that much need of a little extra push on defense based on what we've seen. But they're also in a spot where they're feeling a lot better about themselves than they did in Week 18 against the Seattle Seahawks. All right, I'm going to answer some questions. We've been on for 40 minutes. Got over 1,000 of you watching. The push to 100K real subscribers continues. We're at 98,961. Again, I think that it's destiny. I think that we're going to hit 100,000 just as the 49ers play the Seahawks, or I think we can get really close to it. And maybe that was meant to be. Maybe the 100K was, and maybe, the stars are aligning for this insane convergence. The thing is, for that to happen, you've got to hit the subscribe button. So if you want us to hit 100,000 right as the 49ers play the Seahawks, which in my opinion would guarantee a victory for the 49ers. I mean, I don't know if you guys are superstitious or anything, but um, you guys have to sub to make that a possibility. You might even be able to control the mojo of this 49ers game against the Seahawks. So hit that subscribe button. We're already growing quickly here, already a couple more subscribers since I started talking about it. But this is the most in-depth coverage of the 49ers there is. While you're here, while we're talking about Fred Warner, this has already uplifted the 49ers team. Even if he doesn't play, I think it's really, really important to note that Trent Williams said it best. He has already boosted the 49ers in a massive, massive way. Just the fact that he has the 5'4" on his chest again, that he's out on the practice field. I mean, everybody was bouncing around. We talk about energy. You want to talk about how did the 49ers beat the Seahawks? How do they flip the script from week 18? Well, one thing about week 18 was that they were exhausted in week 18. I mean, this team was just gassed, leaking oil. They had played the Colts prime time. Then they turned around, and that was Monday Night Football. Short week, and they played the Chicago Bears on Sunday. Then they get another short week because they play Saturday. So it's just short week against the Seattle Seahawks. And these are all primetime games. And then obviously there are the injuries, and they are just depleted by the time that they faced the Seahawks, especially since that game against the Bears was one of the longest marathons that you'll ever see. The defense was out there for a lot of snaps. The offense was out there for a lot of snaps. They were exhausted. Well, a lot of people will say, well, it looks like they'll be exhausted again. They had to travel cross country to Philadelphia, and now it's going to be another short week. And yeah, based on days of rest, especially versus what the Seahawks have, 13 days in between games, 5 for the 49ers. By the way, since 1984, teams with only 5 days of rest playing against teams with 13 or more days of rest in the playoffs have gone 0-7. So the math does indicate that the 49ers are facing an extremely steep uphill climb. I grant that, but that's where Fred Warner comes in. Even if he doesn't play, there was more bounce in the step of the 49ers yesterday than I had seen all season at practice. That's where the spiritual, psychological boost of seeing Fred Warner work his ass off, get back on the field, can give the 49ers an edge that no one was expecting. Again, if you want to see the buoyancy, just watch the tape from practice yesterday. I think a lot of the guys look excited. Look at Brian Robinson. Look how fired up he is looking at Fred Warner. And then Fred Warner and Brian Robinson, right? Look, Robinson lets out a primal scream as Fred Warner gives him a little half hug. I mean, these guys are fired up. This doesn't look like a team that is playing on its third short week in 4 games. It absolutely doesn't. And Trent Williams has said the same thing. It doesn't feel like a locker room. But, the 49ers didn't even practice at full speed before the Week 18 game against the Seahawks because they were so exhausted. They ran a full speed practice yesterday. And I don't know if they're able to do that safely, to do that, psychologically effectively if Fred Warner's not back to give them this kind of emotional boost. So don't underestimate the energy that Fred Warner has infused in this team. I think that the only way that you properly cover a situation like this where the 49ers have already exceeded so many expectations as underdogs, I think you have to try to study the vibes of a team, and you have to try to study the energy level of a team. Because at the end of the day, these are all professionals, right? And even if there are a lot of injuries on one side, the next guy up is a professional football player. So the 49ers have lost star power, but what they haven't lost is their will to compete, their will to fight, and their will to win. And I think Steve Young said on KMBR yesterday that the whole totality of this season for the 49ers will be studied by the rest of the NFL because of how they've been able to pick themselves up off the mat and deliver even in the face of crazy, crazy injury decimation. And I think that the way that they've been able to do it is that they've been able to keep a vibe of energy in the building that has not given up, has not been discouraged. And it's taken the right type of people and the ultimate right person for that energy level to be a standard in the building is Fred Warner himself. And I think that ever since the 6-week mark after the recovery, there have been rumblings in that 49ers building that he was going to be able to come back this year, that he was shooting for that. And I think the 49ers noticed, and I think that it's helped them get to this point, and now they can cross that Rubicon. They can get to the level where they beat the Seattle Seahawks because of it. They're underdogs. There's no question about that. Seattle has massive advantages in this game, but it is the classic deep water game. Take Sam Darnold to deep water, see if he begins visualizing some ghosts down the field. See if you can get a greasy takeaway or two to tilt things in your favor, similar to the 2021 game at Green Bay. To do that, you have to stop the run. You're much differently built than you were just 2 weeks ago against Seattle. You might be built to do that this time. To do that, you have to convert third downs, and you have to play the game outside of a 20-yard box on offense. And if Ricky Pearsall's back, I think you're much better built to do that if you're the 49ers. So things are different now than they were in Week 18. Are the 49ers still facing a tremendously tough uphill climb? Yes. But all they needed was an opportunity and a sliver to show that they can put a better foot forward than they did in Week 18. And that is the objective pathway, the objective strategy pathway for the 49ers forward to potentially beat the Seattle Seahawks. Thanks for watching. We got a couple new members. Randy is a member. You guys can join as members of the channel. And Mike says that Seattle put up 13 points on a team coming off of 2 short weeks and a devastated defense. Going to be a lot better game than people are thinking. I would agree. I think the point spread is a little aggressive at 7.5. Unfortunately for the 49ers, no George Kittle does hurt, but so does no Micah Williams, so does no Nick Bosa, so does no Fred Warner, but maybe they do have Fred Warner, so we will leave it at that. All right, hit that subscribe button. We are exploding right now. It is at, oh my God, it's almost at 99,000. I mean, we should get to 99,000 by the time I wrap up right now. So if you want the 49ers to win, hit the subscribe button, because if you do, we'll hit 100,000 at the time of kickoff. And that would guarantee a win. I guarantee it. If this hits 100K before kickoff, there's no way that the 49ers are losing this game. Problem is that we're still about 1,000 away. So you guys better hit that sub button right now. All right. We'll talk to you soon.